Welcome everybody to our webinar session today. I am Pallavi Banerjee, Marketing Manager for the APAC region. Our webinar today will deal with the FSSC new version, which is the FSSC version 6. We have two really distinguished speakers with us today. I'll introduce them in just a bit. Before we start the webinar, I'd like to cover a few sanity or hygiene points. Sujin, can you please move to the next slide, please? Yeah. So first thing, we will share the recording of the webinar because we usually get a lot of questions that will the recording be shared. So yes, the recording for today's webinar will be shared with everybody who had registered for the webinar, latest in a week's time after the webinar ends. Whatever questions you have during the session, our speakers will be more than happy to answer it. Please keep sending to us on chat. Once the presentation is over, Sujit and Smita, both our speakers, will make their best attempt to answer all your questions in the question answer round. And there'll be a short survey just after the webinar. I request you all to kindly fill the survey so that we can bring better webinars for you and better engagements for you. Sujit, next slide, please. Yeah, so our speakers, as I said, two really distinguished speakers for the day, Sujit Kumar and Smita Murthy. Sujit Kumar is an assessment manager for food operations at LRQA with close to 3 decades of experience. He is a well-known name in the industry. No introduction needed there. Smita Murthy, again, a very distinguished speaker herself. She's the India representative for FSSC. She's worked with food and beverage companies for more than 2 decades. So we have a really heavy, distinguished panel today. Thank you both for joining us at for this webinar. And without much ado, Sujit, next slide, please. I'll just quickly introduce our LRQA food safety features, and then I can hand over the session to Smita. So we say that we are specialists throughout the food chain. That is because we are all across the food chain. Not to sound cliched, but yes, from farm to fork. And when I say farm to fork, all kinds of farm to fork. So we have accreditations with more than 50 accreditation bodies globally. So with LRQA, your food safety is completely taken care of. Now, Smita, handing over the session to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Pallavi. Can we run a little poll before we get into the session?
Sure, I'll just launch the poll. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so that's good. Pallavi, can I take over now?
Of course, all yours, Smita. Thank you so much.
Yes. So again, a very good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for being on this webinar. I think also thank you to LRQA for having me on this webinar. So thank you very much. Let's just start with version 6 of FSSC 22000. And I think this question is top of everybody's mind. Why do you guys keep changing the standard all the time? It was 5.1 1 year ago, and now you're at 6. So there are a couple of reasons why the changes had to be made. One is because ISO 22003, which is the requirements for accreditation and for certification bodies who audit organizations. There have been changes in that, and we had to take them into account as well. The other thing that has happened is it's not just about requirements in accreditation and certification, but FSSC does believe that we have to help our organizations meet the UN SDG goals. FSSC also has our motto is to create a better world, and we also want to help organizations that are certified to get better. And one of the ways is to link it to the UN SDGs. I think there'll be a little more discussion on this. Sujit will take you through that also. As you know, FSSC is a not-for-profit organization, and we have a board of stakeholders which comes from all the food companies, all the major food companies. So there have been some changes which have been brought in with respect to the stakeholder feedback as well. And of course, there's the usual thing. We also need to continuously improve our standard. There have been some editorial changes also that we needed to do. So all these things put together made us release a new version, which is now version 6. Can we go to the next slide, please? Why and what is the benefits of going to version 6? I think a lot of the details you will hear through today's seminar, but the major thing, like I talked about SDGs, the Sustainable Development, UN Sustainable Development Goals, we have added food loss and food waste into the version 6 standard now. So it is part of the audit scheme, and organizations will be audited to it. What exactly it means, again, I think Sujit will be talking to you on it. We have in this version incorporated quality control parameters as well. So while there is a need to have something like an ISO 9000 for a full quality system certification, we do recognize that food safety is food safety and quality parameters a lot of times are together. They are integrated, and they are the ones which help food become safe. So there are quality control parameters which have also got included in the standard. Food safety culture was always part of the standard, but there have been more clarification, and there's more focus now in the version 6 on food safety and quality culture. There are some other benefits. We've had situations where the certificate authenticity you could not know that before, and there were a lot of fake certificates going around. You could hear about people giving FSSC 22000 certificate, but they were not really a licensed CB, or they didn't have the license to do the audit, and the certificates therefore were not real. So we've remedied that by adding unique QR codes to the certificates. There have been some extension of scope in the new version. So there is a new scope on trading and brokering and food e-commerce. There is also one scope in B3 which is added, which is like the pre-processing of plant material. So it's like fruit pack houses are examples of a B2. B3 scope here. And of course, we've been publishing guidance documents in the past, and there will be more coming up this year to help with understanding the standard better. There is also a plan to have interpretation articles, which will help the auditors as well to interpret a standard and audit it that much better. So these are work in progress still, but before the end of the year, all this will be available. Can we go to the next? And I think I need to hand it over to you, Sujit, to take us through all the details now.
Thank you, Smita. Thank you for the detailed explanation of why the changes were required and the benefits of these changes. So we will go into a little more detail about what are those changes and how organizations can implement those changes. So I will talk about those changes in a bit. So first of all, welcome you all to this webinar, and I hope all of us are fresh with the Food Safety Day celebrations. And the topic or the agenda for this Food Safety Day celebration was food standards saves lives, and FSSC 22000 is in the forefront of food standards, and I hope that version 6 will further advance the requirements related to the food standards which are saving lives. So let's look at what are the changes, specific changes into the scope. So the scope categories were realigned in IS. This is in line with ISO 22003 Part 1, and there are new additions to the scope categories. There are some realignment to the scope categories. So we will discuss about that. So the first change is that there is a new C0 category which has been created, and earlier we used to have 4 subcategories under category C, which is C1, C2, C3, and C4. Now there is an addition of C0, and this C0 is carved out of C1. Earlier C0 and C1 was together. Now C0 is an additional category which includes the primary conversion of animals. So these are basically conversion of animal carcasses intended for further processing. This includes lairage, slaughter, evisceration, chilling, bulk freezing, bulk storage of animals and game gutting, bulk freezing of fish, and storage of game. So, and C1 only includes the processing of perishable animal products. So that's the differentiation. Then there is a new category B3. B3 is carved out of C2. Earlier, processing of perishable plant products was under C2. So it has been divided into B3 and C2. So in B3, these are the activities on harvested plants that do not transform the product from the original form. So this is basically cleaning, washing, rinsing, sorting, grading, trimming, waxing, aeration, storage, packing, repacking, wherein the original form of the plant product is not changed. And normally the pack houses come under this category. Then the next change is related to the pet foods. So we had a subcategory under D, D2A and D2B, wherein the pet foods were there. Now the pet foods has been moved to category C. So processing of pet food from animal perishable products, plant perishable products, mixed products, or ambient stable pet foods are coming under the category C. So C1, C2, C3, C4 would also include the manufacture of pet foods. Apart from this, there are certain scope changes. The first is the addition of F2. So this is basically trading and brokering. Here, buying and selling of products without physical handling, like agents. So this is included in F2, and now we can go for FSSC certification for trading and brokering. Then category A, farming of animals for meat, honey, eggs, fish, seafood has been removed from the FSSC certification, and even FSSC 22000 quality has been removed from the FSSC version 6. So these are the changes that has happened. Then there is another change which is related to category G. Category G is consolidated. Earlier we had G1, which is the processing of perishable feed and food products, as well as G2 was ambient stable feed and food products, storage and distribution. Now both of them is included into one category, which is category G. So this includes storage and distribution of perishable food and feed, including packaging materials. This also includes relabeling, repackaging, wherein the handling of the product is excluded is the open export product materials. Apart from this, now any off-site catering kitchens or industrial kitchens are specifically put under C3, category C3, and it is no longer part of category E. So these are the key changes in terms of the scope. Now we look at the additional requirements and what have changed in the additional requirements. So there are some new additional requirements added to the FSSC version 6, as well as some requirements have been reclarified or updated. So we will look into that. So the new FSSC 22000 additional requirement, there is a specific requirement on food safety and quality culture. So there was a requirement of food safety and quality culture earlier, but there was no specific additional requirement in that in the version 5.1. Now there is a specific requirement on food safety and quality culture in version 6, which is mentioned under 2.5.8 of the additional requirement. So as a part of organization's commitment for cultivating positive food safety culture, the senior management has to establish, implement, and maintain a food safety and quality culture. And this, as a minimum, should include elements related to communication, elements related to training, elements related to employee feedback and engagement, elements related to performance measurement of the organization's food safety and quality. The objectives for the food safety and culture plan shall be documented, and this should be reviewed during management review, and it should be a part of your continuous improvement process. FSSC Foundation is going to publish additional guidance document during the course of this year, and you will be able to get more information on how to implement food safety and quality culture. The second new requirement on FSSC additionally is about the requirement for quality control. So the basic quality control requirements is now incorporated in the FSSC 22000 version 6. The main reasoning is that the key quality control parameters is linked to food safety in a manufacturing environment. So there are requirements related to establishing of quality specification, complying to the finished goods specifications. There are requirements to establishing quality policy and quality objectives, but this is not designed to replace ISO 9001 certification. So there are requirements related to quality control and quality policy, quality objectives, but it would not be a replacement for ISO 9001. So the organization shall implement, establish, and maintain quality policy and objectives. The organizations would establish, implement, and maintain requirements for the finished good specifications, and the organization would evaluate the results of quality control parameters, and this should be an input to the management review process. Also, the quality control requirement shall become part of your internal audit process, and it should be covered during the internal audits. Now, the next requirement is related to the information related to equipment hygiene. So so there is a requirement that equipment hygiene related requirements needs to be implemented. So your purchase specifications should have guidelines related to the hygienic design of equipment, and to make sure that whatever food processing equipments are used in the food supply chain meets the requirements of the standard. Then there is a requirement related to food loss and waste. So Smita was discussing about the commitment of FSSC version 6 to comply in terms of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So this requirement has been added, and is one of the most innovative changes in the scheme, wherein what FSSC has done is they call it as a silo breaking approach to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So what is a food loss? Food loss occurs before the food reaches the consumer as a result of issues in the supply chain, which is production, processing, storage, and distribution phases. Whatever food gets wasted is considered to be food loss, and food waste refers to food that is fit for consumption but is consciously discarded at the retail or consumption level. Maybe products reaching best before date, or products which is at a retail shelf which has been discarded. So the rationale for less food loss and waste is that this will give result into more efficient processes. This will also mean that there will be more safe food for the world. So what you need to do is that you need to establish documented policy and objectives related to the organization's strategy towards reduction of food loss and waste, and how this is going to be managed. So this can be managed as animal food or feed, and to make sure that there is no contamination of products when food loss or waste is generated. Then there is a requirement related to communication. So this was always there, but this is now added as a requirement in additional requirement. So any serious events, the organization need to communicate to the certification bodies within 3 working days. So this serious events can be a product recall, this can be related to a serious complaint, or can be related to an emergency at site. The certified organization has an obligation to inform their certification bodies within 3 working days. And this has been there as a requirement earlier, but now it is added as an additional requirement. So these are the new changes to the FSSC 22000 additional requirements. Now I can go to the next slide, which talks about what are the modifications or addition to the existing requirements. So some elements are added to the existing requirements. The first one is for packaging material manufacturing companies, packing material manufacturing companies for category I. So this requirement is under 2.5.1, which is management of services and purchase materials. So if an organization is using recycled packaging materials, then the organization needs to establish criteria related to the use of recycled packaging materials. So it's not mandatory that you need to use recycled packaging material, but in case recycled packaging materials are being used, then there is a need to establish criteria related to them. Then there is a requirement under 2.5.2, which is product labels and packaging, wherein if there are any claims which is made on product labels and packaging, this needs to be supported. There has to be control on such claims. So you need to maintain evidence of validation on such claims. You need to establish verification systems to ensure that the claims are adequately addressed. There has to be proper traceability systems in place to ensure the claims are addressed, which includes mass balance and to ensure the product integrity on such claims. There are requirements related to artwork management and print control procedures. Again, this is specific to packaging material manufacturing. So when there are artwork printed on packaging materials, there has to be some controls. And these controls is in terms of approval of the artwork. These are controls in terms of the change management, in terms of the change in artwork. These are in terms of the approval for the print run, error detection procedures to be established, as well as to have proper segregation of artwork materials and accounting systems in place to make sure that how you handle the unused printed materials. All of this is a requirement under artwork management and print control procedures. Then there are certain requirements which has been added into food defense and food fraud requirements for suppliers. This is specifically to category F2, which is trading and brokering. So what it says is that there has to be the suppliers of the traders and brokers will also implement food defense and food fraud requirements, and this needs to be ensured. So this is specific to only trading and brokering. Then there is some additional requirements in allergen management. This is applicable to all food chain categories. A list of allergens needs to be maintained. This includes all raw materials and finished goods produced by the organization. There has to be a specific risk assessment in place. Control measures needs to be implemented. Adequate validation and verification procedures needs to be in place. Precautionary warning labels in case it is established that there is a chances of cross-contamination. The label should may contain a type of warning labels on your product packages. There are requirements related to training of personnel involved in the allergen management, and the requirements for the review of the allergen management plan. When you need to review the allergen management plan is established in the existing requirements for allergen management. There are few more changes in the allergen management in the additional requirements. The first one is again related to environmental monitoring. Environment monitoring is applicable to category B3, category C, category I, and K. So there is a requirement for risk-based environmental monitoring program, which includes pathogens, it includes spoilage organisms, which includes indicator organisms. So this has been made more clear that the risk-based EMP should include pathogens, spoilage organisms, and indicator organisms. There has to be a procedure for evaluation of microbiological controls. There needs to be a review of the trends from the environment monitoring data, and there is a requirement established in terms of the review of the EMPs, and these are very specific need to review the EMPs. The EMPs need to be reviewed annually, or when there are changes in the organizations, when there are out of specification trends, when there are no positive results for a long period of time, when pathogens are detected, or when there are alerts or recalls related to the products produced by the organization. After environmental monitoring, there is a requirement related to transport tanker cleaning. This is applicable to all food chain categories. So there has to be a risk-based plan for cleaning of tankers. You should review the cross-contamination risk and control measures. There has to be cleaning validation of the tankers and see that the cleaning of tanker is effective. There has to be a systems in place to verify the cleanliness of the tanker prior to loading. And for receiving tankers, all of these controls shall be established by the suppliers, and they shall be covered by the supplier agreements. Okay, so this is the requirements related to transport tanker cleaning. Going forward, foreign matter management has been added under hazard controls and measures for cross-contamination. So this is applicable to all food chain categories except F2, which is trading and brokering. So the organization shall have a risk assessment in place. Here, the risk assessment is to understand the need and type of foreign body detection equipment. So these foreign body detection equipments can be magnets, can be metal detectors, can be X-ray machines, can be filters, can be sieves. So there has to be a foreign body detection equipment as per the risk, and this needs to be established. If there are no foreign body detection equipments based on the risk assessment, this justification needs to be documented in your food safety management system. There has to be procedure for foreign matter management, which includes breakage linked to contaminations of metal, ceramic, hard plastic. So more focus on foreign matter contamination and management is in the new version 6. Then there is a requirement for product development, wherein the shelf life validation, once done, should be followed up by the ongoing shelf life verification. So, and the frequency of the shelf life verification should be based on the risk of the product. So, shelf life verification should be part of your food safety management system verification. And this is applicable to category B3, C, D, E, F1, I, and K. And the last requirement is about the validation of cooking instruction for ready to cook products. So in the product development process, when the cooking instructions are part of the label and for the ready to cook products, these cooking instructions shall be validated, and this should be available within the organizations. So these are the changes that is there in the requirements of FSSC. So before handing over to Smita, I would request Pallavi, can you have a poll to understand what are the key elements? So 76% of you say that you need guidance on food safety and quality culture. And many of you are also asking for equipment management and food loss and waste. Yes, this is in line with what we have seen globally. And yes, so I hand it over to Smita to take you through the next elements.
Yeah, I think Sajid has covered most of the changes which are relevant to organizations implementing FSSC 22000. So can you just click on the slide, Sujit? A couple of changes. I think I mentioned this before as well, to make sure that your certificate is authentic. Now all certificates will come with a QR code. So when you're issued one, there'll be a unique QR code added to your certificate, which you can scan, which can be scanned, and it will give all the details. So yeah, this is, I think, a very important thing that we have put in to prevent fake certificates for FSSC coming up. There are some things which the CV, when you get audited, you will have this discussion. There have been some adjustments to the audit duration to make it, yes, one thing is there are a few added requirements, but also to make it more, more useful for the auditee, as well as to make it easy for the CV to report. There have been some realignments of audit durations, and I think when you apply for your new certificate, or when you apply for the new audit, the surveillance or a new certificate audit, these audit durations will be discussed with you by the CVs. So there are some requirements now on a minimum audit duration that has to be done. So it can't just be a 0.5 day man-day audit, for example. Yes, if you can move. Of course, I think there will be a slide which will show you a scheme overview. There have been some adjustment to the annexes, and I think there are few that will be relevant to organizations which are getting audited. One would be on the ICT approach, and I'll talk to it when we get there. Yeah. Yes. So in the annexes now, there is also an annex for ICT. ICT stands for using information technology to do an audit. A lot of this came in through the COVID pandemic, and now this is something that we are going to be offering regularly. Of course, there are a few criteria that needs to be met before an organization can have a remote audit happening or using the internet. There are things like the maturity of the organization that needs to be considered. You also need to consider what are the tools that you're going to use. You need to consider if the certified organization has a possibility of doing remote audits. Do they have electronic records? Do they have documentation in electronic forms that can be shared? So these are some of the things that need to be taken into account to judge the feasibility of a ICT audit, and your CB along with the organization will take this call, and then an ICT approach is possible. So there'll be two components to it, usually a remote part which can be done like a document review, looking at changes from the last audit, looking at any customer complaints that you've had. All this can be done remotely, but there is a full on-site audit component to this also, which also is part of the ICT approach. And at any stage in the FSSC certification, the 3-year cycle, and remote audit using an ICT approach is possible. But yeah, there are some caveats, some things that need feasibility assessment needs to be done before an ICT can be used for your audits. So that's the general thing on ICT requirements. The next question that comes up is so many changes. Well, a lot of them are strengthening the old changes. So yes, there are a few new changes. The timelines that we are giving is, as you know, it's been, the standard was released on 31st of March. And there's a whole 12-month window period before the audit to this standard will be applicable. So yes, the audits will to version 6 will start from April 2024. So you have a full 12-month transition window to do this. Like I said, there are new requirements, yes, but a lot of them are existing requirements which have been strengthened, clarified, and so this 12-month window, we believe, will be good enough to transition to the new version 6. So the audits will start only in 2024. And yes, once the audit starts in 2024, everything needs to be complete. All certificates from the version 5.1 needs to be upgraded to version 6 by 2025 March 31st. So that's the timelines that have been given for this. And like I said, because the changes, most of the requirements have been strengthened, and there are a few new requirements, it is also likely that an upgrade audit could be an unannounced one. So if you're in that cycle where you've not had an unannounced audit, your upgrade audit could also be unannounced. Yes, all requirements you can find on our version. There's if you click on the download the scheme documents, all the annexes, all the scheme documents, you can come to you as a bundle. And I encourage you to please go onto the FSSC website and have a look at it. The guidance documents, the current versions on environmental monitoring, food safety culture, food fraud and defense are all there. They are also going to be upgraded, but there is a lot of information already available, and I encourage you to go and have a look at it. Can you go next? Yeah. So I think Sujit took you through the most important part, that is part 2 of the scheme requirements, that is requirements for the organizations to be audited. But this is how the FSSC documents, the FSSC version 6 documents look. There are 5 parts. The scheme overview, which talks about the categories and what is B1 and C1 and C4, that comes in your scheme overview. Sujit has taken you through the part 2, which is most critical for most people on this call, I guess. Then there are part 3, 4, and 5, which are actually more applicable to CBs, certification bodies. They need to meet certain requirements. There are accreditation bodies like NABCB in India, which accredits CBs. There'll be some requirements around that. And there are some requirements around the certification process. So for you as an organization that is certified to FSSC or wanting to be certified, part 2 is your most critical thing that you need to pay attention to. Of course, there are appendices which are definitions and normative references. But everything that you need, you will get as an organization. If you already have some version of FSSC version 5.1 now, pay attention to part 2. Like I said, there are annexes. What would be of interest would also be the ICT approach, which is in Annex 5, which is what I talked about, where you can do partly remote and some part of it using a full on-site audit using the communication technologies available. The other annexes are not so relevant to an organization that is getting audited, but these are all annexes which talks about how the scope statement should be. There is an audit report template, how the audit report should have, how the certificate should look. So all these come in the other annexes. But as organizations, you need to pay attention to part 2 in the scheme and maybe the ICT if you're interested in it. There are other addenda and modules that FSSC also gives, like if you're an exporter to the US, there is a FSMA addendum that could be useful. The FSMA addendum has requirements that come from the FDA modules. It is not instead of FDA. The FDA can still choose to audit you and inspect your material when they land up on the US shores. But the FSMA addendum helps you understand what the requirements are, and it can also bring in a little confidence saying that you have looked at FSMA requirements before you've exported. Costco, there's an additional module for Costco. So anybody supplying to Costco, this module is useful to you, and this can be audited along with the FSSC 22000 audits. There is another ISO 23412, which is an addendum for transport. mainly cold transport. So not so relevant maybe here, but there are requirements. It's an ISO standard, which is also an addendum. Then there are packaging modules specifically for McDonald's, which is the happy GQSR addendum. So these are additional things. If you are dealing with any of these organizations, this is something that can be done along with the FSSC audit. So do look at this if you are in any of these categories. Yes, Sujit, if you can just move. And I'd like to close this by saying that please go to our website. There's a lot of information there. Like I said, even the guidance documents, you can download all the scheme documents and along with the annexes there. There's a document which gives the change from version 5.1 to version 6. So it's like an easy, it's like a ready reckoner that you can have to know what are the new things that have come up in version 6. The upgrade process is detailed there, and like I said, the guidance document. Please also have a look. We have a public register where all the certified organizations are listed, and there is something that we call FSSC on-site, where if you have a lot of say plants that are certified to FSSC and you want to know when the certification is due and whether the certificate is valid, there's a new thing that we also offer called as FSSC on-site, where you can register and kind of get all these updates sent to you on an email. So do have a look at that too. And for anything, of course, I am based in India, and I think you can get in touch with Sujit always from LRQA, and I'm as well based in India, and my coordinates will be with LRQA. So if there's anything, we are here to help you. Thank you. Thank you, Sujit.
Yeah. Thank you, Smita. So we invite your questions, and you can ask us any questions that you have, and based on the available time, we will try to answer the maximum questions. And in case we are not able to answer them, we would our team would get back to you with the answers post the webinar as well. So Pallavi, do you have any questions?
Yes, we have a lot of questions coming in. So, once more, thank you, Sujit. Thank you, Smita, for the wonderful, wonderful session. We do have a lot of questions, which is a good sign. So, yeah, here it goes. First question says, I am certified with 5.1, FSSC 5.1. How to upgrade to version 6?
Smita, you want to take this? Yeah, Smita, you want to take this?
Yeah. So I think Sujit did talk about this also. So if you're already certified to 5.1, audits to version 6 will start only next year. So in 2024, April, it will start. You have 1 whole year to incorporate all the changes that have happened in the standard, which is what Sujit talked about, all the new requirements like food loss, food waste, equipment design. You need to incorporate all these, look into these and see whether you meet those requirements, or get them, start approaching them and try and meet them. And of course, there are some standards which have been strengthened where additional clarification has been provided. So what I would suggest is please go to the FSSC site, download the version 6 scheme document or the gap assessment document with version 5.1, where you'll see what the changes are. And those are the things you start to get into place before you're going for your new audit for version 6 next year. But remember, you have an entire year to do this work. And I'm sure there will be some training and stuff from LRQA, which will also be helpful for you. I think the poll question already talked about areas where people require additional information, and I think I'm sure LRQA will be organizing more training around topics in version 6. Yeah.
Thank you, Smita. The next question is how to address quality control requirements in the new FSSC version 6.
Thank you, Pallavi, for the question. That's a great question. So See, if you see food safety and quality go hand in hand. So most of the organizations, they have established quality control systems, and an effective quality control system is important to ensure food safety. So that is why quality control has been included in the new version 6. So, so these are basic quality control systems to be in place. So what as an organization that you need to do is establish quality policy and quality objectives for your organization. This can be integrated with your existing food safety policy and FSMS objectives. Then you also need to establish quality parameters related to your product, finished products. So these are the specification in terms of weight, volume, parameters related to quality, and to ensure that the results of your quality is being reviewed periodically and is an input to your management review. So that is how quality control is now closely integrated with your food safety requirements, and you implement those requirements.
Thank you, Sujit. So our next question is, we need more insight on handling the waste at contractor site. Do we need to monitor that as per new guideline?
Can you repeat?
Yeah. We need more insight on handling the waste at the contractor's end. Do we need to monitor that as per the new guideline? So I believe the question is asking, under FSSC version 6, does the company need to monitor the waste, handling the waste at the contractor's end?
Okay, so let me attempt and then I will try to hand it over to Smita. So I think the question is related to the requirements related to food loss and waste. FSSC version 6 is talking about monitoring of food loss and waste and establishing the requirements related to food loss and waste within an organization. So that is what is the requirement. So you need to establish systems in place. But as an organization, if you are able to influence your suppliers to manage their food loss and waste, it is well and good, but not a specific requirement from version 6. Smita, you want to add to this?
Yes. So, if you go to version 6, there is a clause called 2.5.16 which talks about this. So what is needed really is a policy and an objective detailing how you will try and reduce food loss and waste within your organization, absolutely. And if you're saying contractors, that's your related supply chain, you will have to, the simplest example that I can give you is you can put up something like, I want to reduce my food waste by say 10% over the next 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is. And then you'll have to put in place a few things on what you will do to reduce that waste. So if it is a contractor, maybe you don't have enough control over it, but you can probably start by saying that, I will try and work with the contractor to kind of bring down the waste reduction in a area by something that you can measure or look at it. So there will be more guidance coming up on this, but you need to have some objective. You can start with your organization first and then say, then my related supply chain within my policy and objectives, I will take it over this period of time. That is also another way of looking at it.
Thank you both. So the next question says, although version 6 is mandatory from next year, can we ask for the next upcoming certification this year to follow version 6?
Yeah, let me answer this. Yeah, Smita?
No, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so as FSSC already published that all audits 1st April 2024 would be as per version 6. It is not possible to do any version 6 audit before this date. So if your upcoming audit is in the next few months, it would be still done as per version 5.1. And maybe next year, maybe around this time when you are going for your regular audit, you would have a transition to version 6. Smita,
Can I just
want to
add something to what Sujit said? So, as an organization, if you feel you're ready to go with all the version 6 requirements, I mean, I'm sure you can talk to your CP like LRQA and ask them, have a look when you come and audit us, when you're auditing us this year for version 5.1. But we are already incorporating. Nobody stopped you from incorporating it. But yes, your certificates and your audit to this will happen only next year.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sujit and Smita. So next is in environmental monitoring. Are there any requirements to monitor potential risk chemicals such as pesticides or heavy metals?
So as per the requirement, the environmental monitoring program is for pathogens, foliage, and indicator microorganisms. So this is primarily related to microbiological controls and controlling of cross-contamination from microbiological hazards. So this environmental monitoring program does not cover the requirements related to the chemicals.
Thank you, Sujit. Next is again a specific question. It says for 2.5.15 equipment management, how do we comply to this cost if equipments have been purchased 20 years ago? It's a very specific, clause-specific question for equipments 20 years ago. Yeah.
So the requirement is for any purchase of any new equipment or any changes to the existing equipment. So if you have purchased an equipment 15 years back or long back, then this requirement is not specifically applied unless and until the equipment is leading to an hazard. But any modification to the existing equipment or any purchase of new equipment, your purchase specification shall include requirements related to hygienic design of the equipment. So that's the requirement specific to version 6. Smita, you want to add something to that?
Yes, I think a simple way of thinking about it is if you're using something for 20 years, you probably have SPC done on it. You know how it is working. You have information to tell you whether the equipment meets what it's supposed to do, and so it's what we call grandfathered already. So it's been there, it's been blessed, it's been working well. Then you're okay. But for all new equipment, hygienic design becomes really important. The standard doesn't say that you throw away all your old equipment and buy new ones. So if it is, yes, if it's equipment that you've been using and if it provides the necessary, the correct, product for you using that equipment, it still proves that it's okay.
Thank you both. We don't have much time, so maybe we take the last 4-5 questions now. Can you explain on the requirements related to recycled packaging materials?
Yeah, so this requirement is not related to use of recycled packaging material. In case an organization is using recycled packaging materials, they need to establish criteria for the use of such recycled packaging material to ensure it meets with the law of the land, So there are EU regulations. If you talk about in India, there are FSSC requirements related to use of recycled packaging material. So establish criteria related to such recycled packaging material to ensure that there are no hazards which can be introduced into the packaging material through a recycling process or the materials used in the recycling. Smita, you want to?
No, I guess that is what it explains. I mean, for India, if you know now, FSSC has allowed recycled packaging in bottled water. So if you are an organization that's doing using recycled material to make PET for bottled water, you need to have the criteria. What would be the thickness? What would be the migration? What are the test certificates you would want to know? What is the kind of material that you're going to be using, and how much of it will it be 100% recycled? Will it be 60% recycled? All these are criteria that you need to think of, and you need to have this established. So I think that's where the standard comes from. You need to know what's going into your packaging. So to ensure that the food is safe, that really is the intent behind it.
Thank you, Smita. Thank you so much. So the next question is the validation of OPRP, Operational Prerequisite Program, required according to FSSC? If so, what is the recommended frequency for conducting the validation?
Let me take this, Pallavi. So this is not a new requirement. This is an existing requirement that all control measures, irrespective whether it is a CCP or OPRP, has to be validated. When you speak about validation, validation is a one-time activity, and this is done when you are establishing a control measure. Revalidation is only done when there are changes or your verification system indicates that there are failure in the effectiveness of the control measure. So validation is one time, and it is required that OPRPs needs to be validated.
Thank you, Suju. If stage 1 is conducted prior to 31st March 2023, under which version will the stage 2 audits be conducted?
Smita, you want to answer that?
So say, I think Sujit, as a CV, you should take this. But say if it happens in Feb, your audit is happening in Feb, and this is your stage 1. The stage 2, depending on the kind of findings you get, could happen a month later, which would take you to say a March end, and then in that case you would still do a version 6. But if it is December and you're going in for an audit that happens in Feb, I guess it would still be to version 5.1. Sujit, you can add to this.
Yeah. So the timeline as per the for version stage 1 to stage 2 is 6 months provided by FSSC. So in case you have done a stage 1 version 5.1 and stage 2 is being planned after 1st of April 2024, then the stage 2 audit will be done against version 6 requirement, in spite of your stage 1 audit being done against version 5.1. So if there is a stage 2 audit done before 31st March, it would be as per version 5.1, irrespective of the stage 1 version. If the stage 2 audit happens after 1st of April 2024, it would be as per version 6.
Thank you. So last 2 questions for the day. Producer of recycled resin for food packaging, will they be applicable for FSSC version 6 certification? So if there's a producer for recycled resin for food packaging, they want to know if the FSSC 22000 version 6 certification is applicable for them.
Yes, if recycled materials are used for food packaging, then the production of recycled resins would be they are eligible to apply for FSSC 22000 packaging module category.
Okay, thank you. And our last question for the day. Will FSSC version 6 also alter the procedure on feed certification process?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
So it says, will FSSC version 6 also alter the procedure on feed certification?
Sujit, I'm not sure I understood the question. Can you?
So yeah, so I think the question is about. So earlier there were two subcategories under feed and pet foods, D1 and D2. So now in the new version, that has been removed. So all the categories related to D2, which is pet food, has been moved to category C. There is a change in the feed certification. So all those organizations who are certified to FSSC feed for pet foods, they would see a change in their certification and their category under which they are certified would change after the transition to version 6. So yes, there would be some changes in those companies who are producing pet foods. Their certificate would change and the certification category would change.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, if it is pet foods, yes, I think Sujit mentioned it goes into category C, and again, it will depend on the kind of pet food that you're making. If it's ambient stable products, then it would go to a C4, for example. But if it is feed, then it goes to the D thing still. Yeah.
Thank you so much, both Sujit and Smita. With this, we close the question and answer round for the day and the webinar. Again, thank you everybody who joined us today. I know we have a couple of questions which we could not answer due to lack of time. We will try to answer them over our email. Of course, if you need any other support, please do write to us on inquiries.in@lrqa.com. You can also visit our website, lrqa.com. And as Sujit and Smita mentioned, their coordinates are also available. You can reach out to them on LinkedIn or email. So thank you so much. Thank you everybody for attending our webinar today. A quick reminder, you will get a recording of the session within a week. Also, there'll be a survey at the end of the webinar. It's a very, very short survey. Please do answer it and hope to see you again very soon. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.